Generation Z, also known as Gen Z, consists of people born approximately between 1995 and 2010, with slight variations depending on the source. This generation grew up in an environment deeply impacted by digital technology, high-speed internet, social media, and a series of social, cultural, and economic transformations. Therefore, their behaviors, values, and worldview are quite distinct from previous generations. From an early age, members of Generation Z are familiar with smartphones, tablets, social networks, virtual assistants, and other technological innovations. They are true digital natives, accustomed to navigating multiple screens, consuming short and fast content, and performing various tasks simultaneously, multitasking. This constant connection makes them agile, informed, and adaptable. However, it also exposes them to an avalanche of information and misinformation, which demands an increasingly refined critical awareness. Generation Z values a more personalized and dynamic educational model. They prefer methods that integrate technology and move away from the rigid traditionalism of formal education. Platforms like YouTube, Duolingo, educational TikTok, Udemy, and Coursera are active parts of their learning process. Furthermore, they are more open to self-learning, building knowledge paths based on their own interests. They believe in the importance of diplomas, but also recognize the value of soft skills, practical portfolios, and life experience. For Gen Z, social media is not just a communication tool, but also a space for identity construction. They project, explore, and develop their image through platforms like Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, and Discord. Friendships are no longer limited to physical space. This generation easily connects with people worldwide, forming digital communities based on common interests. Communication is immediate, brief, and creative. Memes, emojis, short videos, and direct messages dominate over phone calls and long conversations. Technology shapes their way of seeing the world. They are connected almost all the time, whether studying, socializing, working, or entertaining themselves. They can interact with multiple screens simultaneously and expect quick responses, fueling a culture of digital immediacy. However, this hyperconnectivity also brings emotional and cognitive challenges, such as difficulty concentrating, anxiety, and digital dependency. Generation Z is highly influenced by digital influencers, often more than traditional celebrities. They trust reviews, user experiences, and authenticity. They prefer to spend on meaningful experiences like travel, concerts, and events rather than material goods. They value companies with clear and ethical positions that are sustainable, inclusive, and socially responsible. Generic marketing campaigns do not attract them. They want purpose and representation. Unlike previous generations, Generation Z is more open to talking about mental health. Topics like anxiety, depression, burnout, and therapy are discussed naturally and urgently. This reflects an important cultural shift, but also reveals concerning fact. Gen Z shows higher levels of psychological distress, often linked to social pressure, digital competition, and global instability. In response, many young people in this generation invest in self-care, mindfulness practices, meditation, physical exercise, and proactively seek therapy. There's also a growing trend of doing digital detox, conscious breaks from social media. In the professional world, Gen Z wants more than a salary. They want purpose. They prefer working in environments with healthy organizational culture, flexibility, inclusion, and innovation. They value autonomy and are attracted to models like home office, remote work, and flexible hours. Many do not want to follow traditional paths and choose digital entrepreneurship, working as freelancers, content creators, developers, designers, or consultants. Additionally, they like quick and constant feedback, replacing annual evaluations with frequent dialogues about performance and progress. Gen Z grows up in a globalized, multicultural world, exposed to complex issues from an early age. Therefore, they have a strong social conscience and activist spirit. They support causes like racial equality, LGBTQIA+ rights, environmental sustainability, social justice, and gender equity. They demand that companies, institutions, and governments also take a stand. Neutrality on important matters is unacceptable. Moreover, they show practical concern for the planet's future, adapting consumption, food, and mobility habits to reduce environmental impacts. The meeting between generations has always been a stage for conflicts, misunderstandings, and learning. But between Generation Z, 1995-2010, and those born before the 1970s, especially baby boomers, 1946 to 1964, and the last of the silent generation before 1945, the cultural clash is even sharper. More than an age conflict, it is a profound mismatch of values, language, worldview, and expectations. The issue is not just age difference. It is a difference in lived realities. For those born before 1970, the world was more linear, predictable, and structured. Careers were built patiently. Relationships followed strict norms. Authority was rarely challenged, and progress meant stability. Generation Z was born into a world of exponential changes, where the pace of social, political, and technological transformations never stops. The internet, social media, and globalization shaped a generation that lives connected, questions absolute truths, and seeks identity amid plurality. While older generations often value discipline, hierarchy, permanence, and silence, younger ones celebrate freedom, horizontality, change, and expression. The language between these generations is so distinct that it sometimes becomes untranslatable. Boomers talk about letters, emails, and phone calls. Gen Z communicates with emojis, memes, short audios, TikTok videos, and ephemeral slang. There are noise, judgments, and misunderstandings, a silence that is not respect, an emoji that is not a joke, a demand that sounds like oppression. Furthermore, Gen Z has a greater appetite for idea confrontation, especially when they feel values like diversity, inclusion, mental health, or sustainability are ignored. For older people, accustomed to deference and respecting authority, this behavior may sound like gratuitous rebellion, rudeness, or disrespect. In the professional environment, the clash is evident. While boomers believe in continuous effort and institutional loyalty, Gen Z expects flexibility, purpose, constant dialogue, and quick recognition. They expect a horizontal environment with frequent feedback, empathetic leadership, and creative freedom. This may be read by older generations as emotional fragility or laziness, when in fact, it is a paradigm shift about what it means to work well. The rigidity of previous models, fixed schedules, long chains of command, and a bite-your-tongue culture does not resonate with a generation that values well-being, mental health, and work-life balance. In education, older generations were taught to obey and memorize. Today's youth are encouraged to question and interpret. This creates clashes at home and school, where more traditional parents and teachers may feel that youth has lost respect. Generation Z, however, no longer accepts truths without debate. They ask why, demand arguments, and seek alternative sources. This is often confused with arrogance, but is many times just critical curiosity. There is also a cultural abyss in concepts of respect and freedom. For older generations, respect is often linked to submission, obedience, and formality. Gen Z understands respect as listening, recognition, and authenticity. Thus, when a young person refuses to blindly follow an order, they may be exercising a modern value of mutual respect, but be interpreted as disrespectful by someone expecting hierarchy. Similarly, Gen Z sexual, aesthetic, and identity freedom, dressing as they want, using diverse pronouns, adopting public causes, can be seen as excess, rebellion, or even immaturity by generations raised in conservative and repressive contexts. Generation Z speaks openly about anxiety, depression, burnout, and therapy. For many older people, these topics are still taboo or seen as weakness. This generates more noise. Older people don't understand how someone so young can be so tired, and Gen Z gets frustrated with a lack of empathy and emotional understanding. What one generation calls weakness, the other sees as courage to seek help. In family life, these clashes multiply. Generation Z wants freedom of expression, autonomy, online time, and space to be themselves, while older generations often demand traditional behavior, strict respect for house rules, and conformity with old expectations. This difference can cause conflicts on topics like sexuality and gender identity, religious beliefs, professional life and career choices, lifestyle, diet, and consumption. Is there a path to reconciliation? Yes, but it requires active listening, humility, and constant mediation. For Generation Z, it's important to understand that older generations are not necessarily wrong, but come from a world where survival required rigidity and obedience. Changing this perspective can generate empathy. For older generations, it's essential to abandon the discourse of "in my time it was better" and recognize that today is different, with other pains, other pressures, and another way of being young. Respect hasn't been lost. It has just transformed. The conflict between Generation Z and older people is not a battle of right versus wrong, but a collision of worldviews shaped by very different historical contexts. The solution lies in the bridge, not the wall. Both generations have things to teach and to learn. The most promising future will be one where experience meets innovation, where the wisdom of elders joins the courage of youth, and where listening triumphs over imposition.